Hi guys, good morning. Hope all of you are doing really good. So we start with SFM now, and the most dynamic, most interesting, and most scoring paper. Not just in Group One, but overall, I feel and I'm very confident that SFM can turn out to be one of the most scoring and savior for you in your CA final journey. The mantra for success is that you study this subject with a lot of understanding. You don't do it for the sake of just passing your exams. That is the biggest mistake students can make, and that is a mistake even faculties are making, where they are teaching you just from exam orientation point of view. You can't study SFM from exam perspective. You understand one thing: there are two subjects which you 100% cannot study. 100% I'm sure under any circumstances. You want to do audit practice, you want to be a finance guy, or you want to get into tax compliances, does not matter, but there are two subjects which you can never study keeping in mind just the exam perspective. One is SFM, the second is direct tax, because these are two subjects which you will be straightforward using in your practical life, irrespective of what profile you take up after clearing CA. It does not matter. So as far as SFM is concerned, my only suggestion, my humble request to you is that you try to study this subject with one motive, that is to understand the know-how of everything. Logically you need to understand everything. There is nothing I can superimpose on you in this subject, because there are no standards, there are no provisions, there are no laws, there are no sections, there are no accounting standards, correct? So for everything that I speak, I need to justify why I am saying that, and every time you want, you can challenge me. Obviously I know you won't challenge me for no rhymes or reasons. There has to be some solid ground for you to challenge me, but yes, I invite you to challenge me on certain things where you don't have your understanding proper. Please challenge me in those cases, because I will have to come up with some logical understanding of why we are doing it. And because it is finance, it becomes very subjective. No two people will have the same understanding. Apart from certain models that we study, certain standard models we study, certain standard formula we learn, that will be same across the globe. Everybody has to learn it the same way because they are recognized models. But as far as logical understanding of things is concerned, everybody might have a different viewpoint, different opinion, and you can always challenge me on that. Okay, so first things first, these are video classes. However, it does not matter, because you will be interacting with me 24/7. You have my straightforward number, that number which is being displayed on the screen right now in the ticker. That is my personal number. That's the same number on which my family members call me up. On the same number you will also call me up. There is no like assistant for me who will then escalate the call to me once you request for it. Nothing like that. I am most easily available on WhatsApp. You can drop me a WhatsApp wherever you have a doubt. I will make sure you don't have any doubts when I am teaching this stuff. I will make it very loud and clear, but still you might have some doubts. Then in those cases you will drop me a WhatsApp message on this number, and if required we will even have a call. But for calls you will have to drop me a message, taking my time, because I will be mostly in the classes. Okay, so that is for the introduction part. Rest I have already spoken in the roadmap to the course. So now I am being very clear that I like teaching the difficult parts first and then going into the easy parts. For me, forex and derivative are the two chapters which have the maximum weightage in exam. Also they are the most challenging topics also, but these chapters I am going to use as a platform for the entire SFM. So I will spend a lot of time doing forex and derivatives. Number one, because they deserve it. Their exam weightage can go as high as 50 marks. These two chapters can account for as high as 50 marks. Number two, most of the things which are conceptually required for you, I will be teaching you in these particular chapters. So when I am doing forex, I will be covering lot of the topics relating to equity analysis also, because we all come from different backgrounds with different level of exposure. Yes, articleship most of you have done, but you do not have direct exposure in equity markets. Without understanding equity markets, you will not be able to understand the derivatives. So when I am teaching you, as I told you, I am being very clear about how I have been teaching, is that I will relate everything that I teach with the practical markets, and that is the must. That is a must for you. Institute has proven that in last couple of attempts. They have proven it very clearly that only if you have practical knowledge about the subject, you will be able to attempt certain questions. Some questions will definitely be a copy paste from your practice manual and study modules, but some questions have been tweaked in such a manner that if you do not have practical knowledge, you will not be able to crack them. Okay, so you have to prepare yourself for the worst possible paper. That is the difficulty level wise, it is the highest possible level of difficulty. We got to prepare for that. We need to ensure that even if the most difficult paper comes, I will still be able to score an exemption in SFM. That is how we have to raise our standards. And then if an easy paper come, then obviously we can target 85, 90 in the paper. Okay, so the most important thing is that these two chapters, forex and derivative, which account for close to 50 marks in exam, you will have to get a thorough understanding of these two chapters, and you got to believe me on this. It is highly probable for someone to score 45 or 46 out of 50 in these two chapters taken together, which means I don't know what exam weightage exactly is going to come, but what I ensure you is that getting 90% marks in these two topics is very easy. And if in difficult topics you can manage to score 90% marks, you can rest assured that overall you will end up scoring 80% plus in SFM, and that is a big booster, especially in group 1. Group 1 scoring is a little difficult, guys. Let me be very clear about it, because of the fact that FR being your first paper, and moreover with the introduction of Ind AS, it becomes really difficult to score in FR. Yeah, there are exceptions. There are people who have done fairly good in FR, but overall I feel the scoring has become a little difficult, and I don't have to speak anything about audit and law. You already are aware about it. Scoring in audit is really difficult. I'll share all these things with you. I'll give you some suggestions. I've been into the teaching for last 11 years now, and I've dealt with around 20,000 plus students, and I'll share my experiences with you. Whatever I have learned and whatever experience my students have shared with me post qualification, I'll share all that with you so that you can get the maximum benefit from our classes. Two more things before I start with my topic. Number one is that you are given two books. Two books are given to you. One is your main book, which is like around 500 plus pages. That is your main book, and that is what we will keep in front of us when we are studying right now. And second is a supplementary book given to you, which covers those questions which I don't feel are very important, but I still want you to go through them. Okay, so how we have broken down our material is, I will do some questions in class which I feel is the most relevant part for discussing the concepts, plus covering whatever is there in your institute reference materials, be it practice manuals, study modules, suggested answers, RTP, model papers, whatever it is, that I will try to cover in the class. Okay, further, after every class I'll give you certain homework questions, or some solved illustrations are given in the book. That is the second level discussion that you have to do. The first level discussion is what I am teaching in the class. The second level preparation is the solved illustrations or the homework questions which I am giving you. There are some questions which I will make clear that you need not do it, so please don't do them, and don't break your head on things which are not required. You got to trust me when you are taking classes from me. You got to trust me also. And if I tell you certain questions are not required to be done because of the change in syllabus, or because those type of questions are not being tested for last 4-5 years, if I tell you don't do it, just leave it. No arguments, no further discussions on it. But sir, what if it comes and all? You need to play with my experience. Okay, I am teaching two subjects in last 10-11 years. So you got to trust me that I can guide you better in those two subjects rather than you speculating what can come and not. And third level of preparation will be the supplementary book which has been given to you. That's around 100 odd pages. That is your third level of preparation. Okay, that is point number one. Point number two is, some of you have this tendency that on day one itself, when you get my books, you start comparing it with study modules. Please don't do that, because new syllabus study modules and practice manuals are still not prepared properly, as a result of which some of you completely go haywired in your mind and you start thinking that, oh my god, where has sir taken all these questions from, because these questions are not given in my book. Please don't do all that, because then what happens is you start asking me, sir, you have done a chapter called international finance is basically forex, what we call as forex. I'll tell you why we call it as forex also. International finance, then you start asking me, sir, I can't find international finance in the institute material. Is it really a part of my syllabus? Or you find some chapter in study material which you apparently don't seem to find in my book, because I have named that chapter as something else. Okay, so please don't do that. If your book has 100% coverage, my book has 200% coverage. Enough? Is that enough? I am saying that on record. If your institute book has 100% coverage, then my book has 200% coverage. Let's not discuss on things which do not require your attention. Rather, if you please focus on things which require your attention, it will be good for both of us. Okay, so please put your energies positively and focus on things which I am teaching you. Go in the same sequence in which I am teaching you. Just go with the flow. Learn all the chapters in the same flow in which I am teaching. Do the homeworks as I am giving them. Do the solved illustrations as are given in my book. That should be more than enough, and I guarantee you an exemption in SFM. Number one. Number two, there is a reward system which we have recently started off. A year ago we started with this, and that is, if any student is scoring 80 or more in SFM in the final exams, that is institute exams, 80 or more, 80% or more if you're scoring, then there is a 100% fee refund that we are going to do. 100% fee refund for students who score 80% or more in SFM. 60% you will get, that guarantee I am giving, but if you end up scoring 80%, it means you have taken a lot of efforts, and that is the reason you will end up getting that much score. And in that case, it is meant to be rewarded, and this is how we plan to reward it. That is by making 100% refund of the fee, whatever you have paid. Okay, best of luck guys. Let's do it. We'll make sure that SFM becomes your favorite subject, and I promise you, after I teach you forex and derivatives, by the end of these two topics, okay, by the end of these two topics, I guarantee you will start understanding equity markets way better than what maximum people understand in India. I promise you on that, because you understand one thing, 95-97% people don't understand equity markets. Yeah, 90% people invest in equity markets, but 95-97% people do not understand equity markets. They're just going with the bunch of investors. They're just going with the media, news, all these things. Knowledge is not there. I promise you, I'll give you knowledge which will be exceeding the knowledge of 95-97% of the population in India. Number one. Number two, I promise you, once done with these two topics, the most difficult paper to read today is Economic Times. You will start reading Economic Times, and you will start understanding each and everything in that newspaper by the end of SFM classes for sure. But by the time we finish up with derivatives, majority of things in the paper you will start understanding. That's a promise. Okay, so we're starting off with the first topic now, that is international finance, or as I call it, forex. That's how we call it, forex. Forex is foreign exchange. Foreign exchange means, so when you study any subject, when you study any topic, the first thing you got to understand is, why are you studying that topic? Okay, so I'll come to the why part a little later. Let me first start off with the topic international finance. You understand what is international finance? International finance is when we are doing business cross borders, cross border transactions we are doing. And when we are doing cross border transactions, there will be some international funding or international payments getting due as a result of you doing cross-border transactions. That is why we also refer to this as forex. Forex means foreign exchange. Okay, in short, we refer to it as forex, that is foreign exchange. So I'll start with the very basics and then we will slowly progress. If I say what is the price of one bottle of water, what is the price of one bottle of water? The price is 20 rupees. How much is the price? Price is 20 rupees. Okay, so if the price of one bottle is 20 rupees, I can also write it like this: rupee per bottle is equal to 20. Rupee per bottle is equal to 20. Now let's say I go to buy this marker in the market and I go to the shopkeeper and I tell him what is the price of one marker, and the shopkeeper will reply, for one marker, sir, you will have to pay me 500 rupees. For one marker you will have to pay me 500 rupees, which means in simple terms I can say rupee per marker is equal to 500. Rupee per marker is equal to 500. This is looking easy, right? Rupee per bottle, rupee per marker, rupee per marker is equal to 500. First of all, you understand what is the meaning of this per. What is the meaning of this per? Per means 1. Per is equal to 1. It means for one bottle of water you got to pay 20 rupees, or for one marker you got to pay 500 rupees. Whose price is this? Whose price is this? This is the price of marker. So we refer to it as base commodity. What is the base commodity? Base commodity means the thing for which price is given. So in first case your bottle is the base commodity, and in second case marker is the base commodity. In what currency is the price expressed? Obviously price will be expressed in terms of rupee, because in India rupee is the currency of exchange that we use. I hope this part is clear to you. The currency in which price is expressed, we refer to it as price currency. The currency in which price is expressed, we refer to it as price currency. And the commodity for which price is given is called as base commodity. Base commodity is the commodity for which price is expressed. Price currency is the currency in which price is expressed. So we need to be comfortable with this thing. Whose price is given? Base commodity. Whose price is given? It is base commodity. In what currency the price is expressed? It is known as price currency. In what currency the price is expressed? It is known as price currency. So price currency is the currency in which price is expressed. Base commodity is the commodity for which price is available. Whenever you write the quotation, you have it as rupee per bottle or rupee per marker. Per stands for 1. It's always the price is expressed for 1 unit of base commodity. 1 unit of base commodity. Okay, guys, so this is the commodity market for you. This is the commodity market. Let us now come to the currency market. If I come to the currency market, obviously there is exchange of one currency against another. Currency market, there is exchange of one currency against another. So in the currency market, let's say in the currency market we will exchange one currency for another. Maybe you are exchanging rupee against dollar. So if you go to the currency market and you ask the currency exchanger, there are different currency exchanges. We'll talk about currency exchanges a little later, but right now you can assume that we have a currency exchanger called Western Union. Okay, so if you go to Western Union and you ask them, can you please tell me how much is the price of $1? So how the currency exchanger will tell you? Currency exchanger will tell you, for $1 you will have to pay me 74.50 rupees. For $1, you will have to pay me 74.50 rupees, which means I can write it as rupee per dollar is equal to 74.50. Rupee per dollar is equal to 74.50. What does that mean? That means per means 1. For $1, we need 74.5 rupees. For $1, we need 74.5 rupees. Okay, now listen. Per means 1. This is 1. Whose price is this, guys? If I ask you whose price is this, you will say this is the price of dollar, which means dollar is the base currency. I can't say base commodity because this is not commodity. Bottle and marker were commodity, but this is currency. Whose price is this? This is price of dollar. So dollar becomes the base currency and rupee is the currency in which price is expressed. So rupee is the price currency. I hope this is clear, guys. Rupee is the price currency, dollar is the base currency. Dollar's price is given, so dollar is the base currency. Price is expressed in rupee, so rupee is the price currency. Are we clear about it? Let's take one more example. You go to the currency exchanger, let's say Thomas Cook. Another currency exchanger, recognized currency exchanger is Thomas Cook. You go to Thomas Cook and you ask them how much is the price of £1, and the exchanger tells you for £1 you will have to pay 91 rupees. £1 is equal to rupees 91. What does that mean? How can I write it? I can write it as rupee per pound is equal to 91. Rupee per pound is equal to 91. What does that mean? Pound is the base currency. Base currency is the currency for which price is given. Rupee is the base price currency, that is the currency in which price is expressed. So price is expressed in rupee, that is why rupee is the price currency and pound is the base currency, because price is given for £1. Remember that price is given for £1. I hope you understand this, that when you compare these two quotations, if you look at these two quotations, guys, how much rupee you need for $1? How much rupee you need for $1? For $1, you need 74.5 rupees, and for £1, you need 91 rupees. You need more rupee for every pound, correct? No, you need more rupee for every pound as compared to dollar. Based on that, if we take rupee as a common currency of comparison, rupee as a common currency of comparison, can I say pound is stronger than dollar? Can I say this? Pound is stronger than dollar. So how do you understand this, that pound is stronger than dollar? Because for every £1, if we compare these two, in terms of rupee, we understand that we need more rupee for every pound as compared to dollar, and accordingly pound is stronger than dollar. We understand that pound is stronger than dollar. Are we clear about it? Okay. See, you need to understand, I'll make life a little easy for you, because throughout Forex we will be talking in terms of price currency and base currency. Throughout Forex we will be talking in terms of price currency and base currency. So the meaning part, I think you have already understood. Price currency is the currency in which price is expressed. Base currency is the currency for which price is given. Base currency is the currency for which price is given. So you understand one thing, that whenever your answer is greater than 1, if I say price currency oblique base currency is greater than 1, price currency oblique base currency is greater than 1. Whenever I say that price currency oblique base currency is greater than 1, what does that mean? That means base currency is stronger than price currency. Can I say that? Base currency is stronger than price currency. Whenever price currency needed for base currency is greater than 1, it means base currency is stronger than price currency. That is why you need more price currency for every base currency. Look at your quotation above, please. Look at your quotation, guys. First quotation, rupee per dollar. Rupee per dollar is greater than 1. For $1, you need more than 1 rupee. For $1, you need more than 1 rupee. which means rupee as a currency is weaker than dollar. Guys, please speak up. Rupee needed for $1 is greater than 1. It means rupee as a currency is weaker than dollar. That's what I have written over there in the summary also. If price currency needed for base currency is greater than 1, if price currency needed for base currency is greater than 1, it means base currency is stronger than price currency. Correct? Next, if price currency needed for base currency is less than 1, if price currency needed for base currency is less than 1, what does that mean? That means price currency is stronger than base currency, which means price currency is stronger than base currency. So can you give us one example? Yeah, I can give you one example right away. See this, pound per dollar. Think about it, guys. You have already concluded here that pound is stronger than dollar. You concluded it, right? Pound is stronger than dollar. So if I ask you, logically also, if I ask you how much pound is needed for $1, how much pound is needed for $1? Logically, please guys, please answer this. Logically, which one do you think is correct? Guys, logically, which one do you think is correct? Pound for $1, pound needed for $1. What do you think? Should be less than 1 or should be greater than 1? Obviously, the answer is that it should be less than 1. Why, sir? Because pound as a currency is stronger than dollar, and accordingly, pound needed for dollar should be less than 1. Pound needed for $1 should be less than 1 pound. Pound needed for $1 should be less than 1 pound, because pound as a currency is stronger than dollar. Okay, I hope whatever I have taught till now, you have understood that. Base currency is the currency for which price is given. Price currency is the currency in which price is expressed. Okay, so just like we have base commodity, similarly we can have base currency. Base currency price is expressed in terms of price currency. If the price is greater than 1, if the price of base currency is greater than 1, it means base currency is stronger than price currency. Clear, no? Base currency is stronger than price currency. You can see it on the board. And if the answer is less than 1, price currency needed for base currency is less than 1, it means price currency is greater than base currency. I hope we are clear with this part. Okay. Now, I am moving on with my discussion and I am asking you something. If rupee per dollar is equal to 70, okay, this is 3 months back. This is 3 months back. If rupee per dollar is equal to 70, this is 3 months back. And today, like spot, rupee per dollar is 75. This is the situation today. Spot rupee per dollar is 75. What does that mean? 3 months back, you needed for $1 you needed 70 rupees. But today, after 3 months, for every $1 you need 75 rupees. Think about it. Does this mean rupee has depreciated against dollar? Can I say that? Rupee has depreciated against dollar. Why, sir? Because for every $1 you need more rupee. For every $1 now you need more rupee. That is dollar has appreciated against rupee. One currency depreciation automatically means another currency appreciation. So what does this mean? This means that dollar has appreciated against rupee. That is why you need more rupee for every dollars now, and it also means that rupee has depreciated. One currency appreciation automatically means another currency depreciation. In 3 months time, the amount of rupee required for $1 has gone up from 70 to 75, and it means that there is depreciation of rupee and appreciation of dollar. Depreciation of rupee and appreciation of dollar. Understand one thing. If I ask you as an Indian, let's not go into what nature of business you are doing. I'm just asking you as an Indian, are you happy or sad when rupee has depreciated? Obviously, as an Indian, we are sad, because if dollar appreciates and rupee depreciates, it is bad for us. It is bad for the Indian economy also. Dollar appreciation is not good. Dollar depreciation is good for us. But their dollar appreciation will benefit certain segment of people in India, which I will speak later on, not now. But for the time being, you understand, if we look at the holistic picture, if we look at the overall scenario, comprehensive picture, we will be sad when dollar will appreciate. Okay, I'll talk 3 instances with you, and I'll make life so easy for you after that. 3 instances, 3 big things have happened in last 4 years. I'll speak all of them. Number 1, when November 8, 2016, you remember November 8, 2016? When I say November 8, 2016, I think the first thing that comes to your mind is Namo. Namo. Correct, no? Narendra Modi. The second thing that comes to your mind is ATM. Correct, no? And the third thing that comes to your mind is 2000 rupees note. Generally, these are the 3 things people can think of when I speak November 8, 2016. And November 8, 2016, Narendra Modi at 8 o'clock in the night, he came and he started singing Mitro. And what did he say? Mitro, from tomorrow onwards, 500 rupees and 2000 rupee notes will lose its value. There is no value for these notes. We are demonetizing the currency. Okay. And then yes, there were certain cascading effects, like they told that you can go and deposit the money in the bank, and then over and above that they have imposed certain taxes on undisclosed income. All those things are there. So superb. So that discussion we do in direct tax. That first what they did, they told you to go and deposit your money in the banks, and then they imposed huge taxes and penalties on that money. So November 8, 2016, when demonetization was announced in India, on that particular day, the next morning, 9th November 2016, within a week, that time rupee per dollar was 63, guys, and this 63 has become within no time 67. Now there are some students who ask me a very good question. I'm asking that question to you. When demonetization happened, whether you support BJP or Congress does not matter, but when demonetization happened, a good question to ask is, BJP was very much in favor of demonetization. Reason being cited is, if demonetization happens, the black money will eradicate from the economy. Terrorist activities will not be funded as a result of that. The segment of people which are churning a lot of black money, they will not have any significance of those currency notes which will be equivalent to tissue papers, because government is demonetizing the currency, and a lot of people were sitting on huge amount of 2000 rupees notes at that time, and that money will have no significance. Yes, some tax planning was done, but most cases it was of no use. Okay, some people purchased real estate properties, some people invested in gold, some people opened multiple accounts in name of their servants or their wage earners, the laborers, and they deposited the up to 2 lakhs, 2.5 lakhs in those accounts in name of every worker that was working under them. There are a lot of tax plannings done. That's a different topic of discussion. I told you we do more of it in direct tax. But right now, what is the important point of discussion is that the good question which students asked me was that, sir, when demonetization was announced, ideally it's a good news for Indian economy because a lot of bad things will stop happening. True, yes, it's true. But then, sir, in the currency market, why did rupee depreciate from 63 levels to 67 levels against dollar? Because if something is happening good for Indian economy, then in those cases Indian currency should appreciate and not depreciate. Brilliant question. That's a $1 million question. Why did dollar appreciate and rupee depreciate, which looks so much contrasting to what actually should have happened? Number one. Number two, in the year 2019, rupee per dollar was close to the mark of 67 and it became 74. This happened in 2019, somewhere in the beginning of 19. Okay, please don't catch hold of me by the dates. Focus on understanding of the concepts, because there's so many things going on in the world now that remembering the exact dates is not possible. So 2019, in fact I would say from 18 end, rupee is continuously under a lot of pressure and 67 has become 74. See, the lollipop level of discussions, what is rupee per dollar, what is rupee per pound, those things I will teach you, sir. But where will this currency have an impact is more important for you to understand. So what I feel is, teaching you things in a closed room without telling you the practical implications, for me that is not teaching SFM. For me that is time pass. Okay guys, so if I am upgrading the quality of my lectures, I want my students also to put in that extra efforts to try and understand things, so that tomorrow when you become a chartered accountant and you come across a situation like this, you should not behave like you have fallen from the sky and you don't understand any of it, because that was not taught to you. Okay, so all big events, macro level events which have happened in the Indian economy in last 5 years, I am discussing with you, so that tomorrow if somebody is talking something similar or is making reference to any of these events, you should be able to say, yeah, I know about it and I know the ramifications and repercussions of this. That's what I want my students to be capable of. Okay, so please listen to whatever I am saying very carefully, because this part of your discussion is not anymore an introduction. This is the advanced level of thing we are studying, and for teaching this advanced level thing, this much knowledge is enough. What knowledge is given to you in first half an hour is enough for you to understand the advanced level things. Yeah, believe me. Just apply your logics. Just apply your logics and everything will make crystal clear sense to you. Okay, please allow me to explain this part. In 2019, why did 67 become 74? Number 2. Number 3. This 74 again came down to 70 by November 2019. By November 2019, it came down to again 68, 69 levels. Okay, and in 2020, or maybe I can say from December end to somewhere around March 2020, I am saying, okay, this quotation has again come close to 75. So one thing we have understood is that currency markets are very volatile. The movements in rupee against dollar are very wild. But everywhere if you see, as an Indian, we are sad because every time the currency quotations are not going in our favor, the rupee against dollar is depreciating. What are the possible reasons that we need to understand? I'll start with 2019 first. Why in 2019 67 has become 74? That is the first part of discussion I will do. And then once you understand that, that is the most comprehensive part of discussion. Once you understand that, the remaining 2 will be cakewalk for me to explain you. Because 2020 what happened and 2016 what happened are almost like similar kind of situations. The reason for fall was similar in these 2 situations. Okay, what happens is, in 2019 what happened is, the United Nations has issued a sanction against Iran for supply of crude oil. Okay, Iran is one of the leading suppliers of crude oil. Now you know these Middle East countries and the Islamic countries, they are mainly involved in crude oil supplies. Iran is one of the leading suppliers of crude. Okay, now you understand one thing. I am not giving you the detailed history. Nobody is interested in that. I am giving you small history. Long back, don't ask me the year, long back, Iran decided they will develop their nuclear weapon. Iran developing a nuclear weapon is like giving a 3-year-old kid a pistol, a loaded pistol. It's as dangerous as that. And a 3-year kid can shoot down anybody indiscriminately. It will not find out, oh, this is my father, this is my mother. No, it can indiscriminately shoot down anybody. Iran decided they will develop a nuclear weapon. At that point of time, the United Nations, they have entered into a treaty with Iran that Iran should not develop the nuclear weapon, and in return United Nations agreed to buy all the crude oil supply of Iran. Now why would Iran be interested in this deal? The answer is very simple. Iran has huge supplies of crude, and if United Nations is agreeing to take their crude supplies, then automatically their bread and butter is taken care of. Iran need not worry about their bread and butter from thereafter, because they will just take out crude, dig out crude, and they will sell and they will make money from that. it's okay. They don't have to develop a nuclear weapon. They can ask for weapons from other countries. That's a different thing. So Iran and United Nations have entered into this treaty where Iran will not develop a nuclear weapon, and in return their crude oil will be purchased. In fact, one of the US embassy is located in Iran, and there is a satellite which is working to check that at any point of time Iran is not developing a nuclear weapon. Okay, so there's an embassy which is keeping a check on this. They are regularly monitoring. So whenever some bad events will happen, I'll speak about those events also. Some bad events will happen. Iran terrorists will first attack the US embassy in Iran. But why is this embassy present in Iran? There is risk involved. Yes, risk is involved, but why still it is present in Iran? Just to monitor their activities, because they don't want to trust Iran by its words that they won't develop a nuclear weapon. So Iran is a supplier of crude oil, and crude supply happens on a regular basis from Iran. In the meanwhile, what happens? US was not happy with certain acts of Iran, as a result of which Mr. Trump has issued sanction against Iran. And whether you want to believe it or not, but US has a great influence on United Nations. So I am introducing some politics. I'll discuss some sophisticated politics at corporate levels or country levels. Okay, so US has great influence on United Nations, and when Trump issued a sanction against Iran, that sanction means no, it's like a boycott. No country will do business with Iran. Okay, some breach of code of conduct Iran would have done, as a result of which a sanction was issued against Iran, that nobody will buy crude oil from Iran. As a result of which, what happens? The one supplier is less in the industry. Correct? No, you understand that. So when US will issue sanction, all the countries which form part of United Nations, they will have to abide by the sanction. They will have to abide by the sanction means if India is also part of United Nations, they cannot buy crude from Iran. So if most of the countries will boycott Iran, one supplier less in the industry, means supplies will go down. Demand is constant, but supplies have gone down. What happens, guys? You know economics, right? When supplies go down and if demand is constant, the prices will go up. You know that, right? The prices will go up for crude oil. But sir, all this you are saying I have understood, but how is this related to this second event in 2019 where 67 became 74? That's what I'm trying to make you understand. Guys, listen. When price of crude will go up, now you understand one thing. India does not have its own crude. Correct? We don't have crude beneath the ground, beneath the earth. We don't have crude. We're not that fortunate. So what happens? We are heavily dependent on purchasing crude from outside. We have imports of crude. Would you believe it if I say that every month close to $40 billion of crude is getting imported? $40 billion of crude we import every month. And I hope you know this. There's something called as Forex reserves. The reserves figure given by RBI. The Forex reserves of any country, explains the net exports that country is doing. Net exports means exports over and above imports. So a country's economy is considered rich if its exports is exceeding its imports. If its exports is exceeding its imports, then the country is considered rich. That is why China that way is considered a very strong economy, because China is mainly involved in exports. They don't have to import. Literally, they don't have to import. They import very limited number of goods. But China is primarily an exporter, and that is why their forex reserves are in trillions. Okay, and the forex reserve of India is close to $450 billion. This is the figure given by RBI, $450 billion. Audited figures. Okay, everybody can find out this information. It's a publicly available information. India forex reserves are close to $450 billion. Okay, if you look at imports figure, the figure is looking very, very discouraging, because if you look at the import of crude oil and if you look at your forex reserves, you understand very clearly that maximum 11 months of crude oil can be funded out of your total forex reserves. Guys, I hope you're understanding what I'm saying. Out of your total forex reserves, which you accumulated in hundreds of years, you can probably only fund 11 months of crude import. So you can understand crude is one of the most important import commodity for India. Crude is one of the most important import commodity for India, and accordingly, if crude prices will change, it will have great impacts on Indian economy. Do you understand what I am saying? If crude prices will change, it will impact greatly the Indian economy. Another important thing you need to understand is that the payment for crudes is done in dollars. Okay, we pay for crude in dollar terms. I hope you're understanding. Now if we link these two stories, what you see on the board, if you can link these two stories. So when United Nations has issued a sanction against Iran, then there is one less supplier in the industry. A leading supplier is less in the industry. When there is one less leading supplier in the industry, then automatically, demand being constant, the price of crude will go up. If the price of crude will go up, then the same crude imports which India is doing, but now it is paying a heavy price, it is paying higher price, which means maybe earlier what you were paying $40 billion now transforms into, we're just hypothetically taking a number, now let's say it transforms into $45 billion, which means $45 billion is what you will have to pay for the same crude import, because there is one less supplier in the industry. And if you need to pay that much dollars, it means extra dollars is demanded. Can I say that? Extra dollars are demanded, and if there is demand for extra dollars, it means dollar as a currency will appreciate against rupee. Dollar as a currency will appreciate against rupee, because now you need more rupee to buy dollars, because you need total more dollars, and if more dollars are required against rupee, then obviously dollar will appreciate against rupee. I hope you understand that. Dollar will appreciate against rupee. I hope we are clear about it. Okay, so if dollar will appreciate against rupee, then 67 will become 74. Now I hope this part is clear. Okay, now listen guys, I have my YouTube page which is known as KP Knowledge Power. Okay, that you can go to that page, and all the important topics that I discuss in the class, like they are related to some practical discussions I do in the class, like this particular discussion, that how crude oil prices are linked to currency market and equity market. I like explain the equity market impact now itself. And next is the important topics of discussion that we are doing, especially in forex and derivatives. Some important topics, the videos are posted over there. Plus I posted a lot of other videos, like what courses you can take apart from CA, or what post qualification profiles you should look for. All these videos are posted on YouTube, and most of the times I'll tell you also about what videos are available, so you can just go and watch those videos to gain some extra knowledge, or just to get a revision kind of a thing. Okay, so this Iran sanction and all those things are posted on YouTube. Okay, so you can see that video. So I hope this part is clear guys. India is a leading importer of crude. Every month we are importing around $40 billion of crude. What is the total forex reserve India has? Approximately $450 billion. Every 2 to 3 months the figures will keep changing depending on imports and exports. Reserves will come from where? Reserves will come from exports exceeding your imports. Okay, India overall can only fund 11 months of its crude imports. So you understand, India is heavily dependent, India is heavily sensitive to crude prices. So crude prices, if crude prices will change for any reason, in this case the reason was that US has issued a sanction against Iran, that nobody should buy crude from Iran. If that happens, then the price of crude will go up. If price of crude will go up, then in that case what will happen? In that case we will end up paying a higher price for crude. Price for crude is paid in dollars, and accordingly more dollar will be demanded, and if demand for dollar is going up, then in that case what will happen? you will end up paying higher rupee for every dollar, because demand for dollar is going up against rupee, so price of dollar will also go up against rupee. That is one thing. Okay, dollar going up against rupee. One thing you need to understand is, when crude oil prices will go up, dollar will appreciate against rupee. This much you have understood, guys. When crude oil prices will go up, dollar will appreciate against rupee. Now understand one thing, Indian equity markets, I'm linking the third thing. Okay, I hope you people will be able to understand. Indian equity markets are heavily dependent on FII money, foreign institutional investors money, FII, FDI, foreign direct investments. We are heavily dependent on these two. When we are looking at Indian equity markets, we are heavily dependent on the money of FII and FDI. Understand one thing, when FII will bring their money in India, let's suppose they have invested rupees 100 lakhs. Just I am asking you one simple maths. From 100 lakhs, if they want to convert back into dollars, simple maths we are discussing. 100 lakhs converted into dollars. Now FII brought their money and they're taking back their money now. So 100 lakhs divided by 64 or 100 lakhs divided by 74. Which one will give them more dollars? Think about it, guys. Which one will give them more dollars on conversion? 100 lakhs divided by 64 or 100 lakhs divided by 74? Come on, if you don't understand that, you can pick up your calculator and do it. Obviously, they will be happy in first case, because if you divide by 64, your inflow will be higher in dollar terms. But if you divide by 74, your inflow will be lower in second case. Do I make sense, guys? I know this is difficult. I know this is not easy, but who wants to do easy things? Let us do difficult things first, because then easy things will become more easier for you. Let us first do difficult things. Get your concepts clear in the class number 1 itself. I don't believe in faking easy things to you. First doing easy things, then making you understand SFM is very easy, you know, let's not make the subject difficult. No, I don't believe in all that. You are in CA final, you should deal with difficult things first. Then we will do easy things, which will become much more easy for you afterwards. FII have put money in Indian markets. They have total of rupees 100 lakhs to take away with them. They want to convert their money back into dollars. Would you convert at 64 or 74? Which one you will be happier? You will be happier when it is 64, not when it is 74. So understand one thing, guys. When rupee depreciates against dollar, FII will not be happy. When rupee depreciates against dollar, FII will not be happy. I will explain this in more details later on, but right now you just understand one thing, maths wise you understand this, that if rupee is depreciating against dollar, FII will get less dollars on conversion. As a result of this, what happens is, when rupee starts depreciating, if I come back to my analysis, we are talking about this analysis right now, correct? No, we're discussing about this analysis. In 2019, when 67 started going towards 74, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, when rupee starts depreciating against dollar, FII is not happy, because if 67 becomes 74, they will get less on conversion. As a result of which, when FII will see that rupee is depreciating against dollar, listen carefully, when FII will see that rupee is depreciating against dollar, before they lose more of their returns, they will take the money from Indian equity market and they will go back. For the time being, they will sell Indian equity and they will take back their money. Listen, if I tell you 64 is better or 74 is better, you will say 64 is better. But suppose if 64 has already become 68, then at 68, you want to take out your money or you want to wait till 74? FII will say, no. At 68, I will exit the market. It is better for me. I don't want to wait till 74. At 68 itself, I will exit the market. So at 68, FII will start taking away their money from Indian equity market. So what will happen, guys? When FII will start selling equity, what will happen? Equity markets will start going down in India, because suddenly what happens is FII will start selling these shares. FII will start selling these shares, and if suddenly they start selling these shares, suddenly the supply of shares will go up and demand will be low, as a result of which price of equity shares will start coming down. I hope this is making sense to you. Okay, so this is like when bad luck will come on Indian equity markets, when bad luck will come on Indian economy, it will come from all fronts. When crude oil prices will go up, dollar will go up, equity markets will go down. And when equity markets will go down, last thing, okay, when equity markets will go down, then what will happen, you know, people will start taking out their money from Indian equity markets and they will put the money in gold. And suddenly what we will see is a lot of people will start demanding gold, as a result of which gold prices will go up. You pick up any debacle in the Indian economy in history, whether it's 2002, 2008, 2013, 2018, 19, like I told you, or 2020, when there is coronavirus all across the globe, the same things will repeat itself. You pick up any event, guys, any event, the same things will repeat itself. So this is like an asset for you. Once you learn it, you can apply it for the rest of your life. You need not like behave like being in the fool's paradise where you don't understand anything and you say, I am a chartered accountant, well, but I don't know these things because it was not part of my curriculum. You don't talk always in terms of your curriculum when you become a qualified chartered accountant. You need to know things beyond that. What is at least impacting your economy, that you need to know. The same thing, whatever I said, a gist of it is posted on YouTube, 3.5 minutes video. Just see that and you will consolidate your knowledge. Okay, this is 2019 scenario, and what's happening presently, like the coronavirus epidemic, which became then the pandemic, and how does this pandemic impact Indian economy. Again, the same thing, when the world is facing a pandemic situation, then obviously why 68 became 75 in March 2020. Why did that happen? Again, the reason for that is very simple, because when coronavirus will happen, countries will go into safety measures where there are no visas being offered to other nationals. It's a kind of a quarantine kind of a situation where people are not going out of their houses. Everybody becomes conservative because a disease has taken over the entire globe. And in those cases, obviously, you understand, people become conservative about their investments. And obviously, in such cases, what do you expect? FI will invest more money, or they will take out money from the economy? Obviously, FI will take out money from the economy. And when FI will take out money from the economy, what do you expect will happen to Indian equity markets? Obviously, Indian equity markets will go down. Okay, so if Indian equity markets will go down, and then in that case, what will happen? Gold equity markets prices will go down. People will start investing in gold, and that is what exactly is happening now. Gold prices have skyrocketed. It has gone up above like 43,000 rupees price. It has touched 43,000 is the price right now, and for every 10 grams. And equity markets are continuously falling because of this pandemic. So this is what exactly happened now. But because countries are not doing great business right now, there's not much of business right now, as a result of which supply of crude oil has gone up, because consumption is not happening for crude oil. Supply of crude oil has gone up, and as a result of which crude prices are going down. But even if crude prices are going down, the dollar is still not depreciating against rupee. Dollar is actually appreciating against rupee. The reason being, crude prices have gone down, but this is that delicate phase of life where even if crude prices are going down, India is not benefiting a lot. Yes, in long term, Indian economy might benefit if the prices sustain at lower levels, but right now, even if crude prices are down, the consumption of crude is not there in the manufacturing companies or in the industry because of slowdown in the economy, as a result of which crude is not being able to impact the dollar prices going down because of overall slowdown in the economy. So India is not being able to take advantage of this fall in crude oil prices, because crude is primarily used in aviation sector, and if you see, the aviation sector is not operating because across countries flights cannot go. So these are the complications you need to understand, as a result of which even if crude prices have gone down, Indian economy is probably not benefiting a lot from it, as a result of which Dollar is still appreciating because nobody is investing in Indian equity markets right now. People have become conservative, as a result of which they are selling rupee and they're converting back into dollars. There is no demand for rupee at this point of time. So dollar is appreciating. FI is taking out money from Indian equity markets. So equity markets are going down. People are becoming conservative. They're putting money in gold. So gold prices are also going up. And guys, exactly same thing happened in 2016 when Indian economy, we introduced demonetization. Demonetization is a kind of experimentation in the economy. Whenever your economy will have any experimentation, that time FIIs will try to take out money from the markets. They don't want to keep their money in the markets because at that point of time it is risky to keep money in such economy. So when India introduced demonetization, nobody wants to take risk with the experimentation phase. People will take out their money. So FII took out their money, and when they take out money, equity markets fell badly in 2016 also. Index went down, and at that time also, because people started taking out money, there was no demand as such for rupee, because only when you invest in Indian equity markets there will be demand for rupee and demand for Indian equity markets. People take out money, they sell rupee, they convert into dollars because they want to convert back into their home currency, and home currency in this case is US dollars. For US investors, their currency is US dollars, so they took out money. Equity markets went down, and again in the currency market, dollar has appreciated. These are three big events, guys, which have happened in last 4 to 5 years. You should be aware about it. Okay, you should be aware about it, and I hope this video is useful for you. If not, you can see it again, pause the class and see this video again, and then only proceed with it. But this knowledge is going to be an asset for you, trust me. You, any point of time, you should be able to explain this relationship to any person. This relationship is a very important relationship for anybody who is in Indian markets and is working in the economic environment. Should have knowledge about this, that whenever crude prices will go up, dollar as a currency will appreciate against rupee. Why? I have already explained that part to you. You can explain with the help of forex reserves and Indian imports per month, and how it will impact the equity markets, how FII will take out their money. You can explain with the help of this example, that if we convert 100 lakhs rupees, we are happy at 64, not at 74, which means FII, when they invest money in Indian equity markets, they want rupee to appreciate against dollar, not depreciate. And if equity markets will go down, then gold prices will go up. This is a relationship which you should know at any point of time. Coming back to the basics of our discussion, where we started from, I have not done a lot of discussion right now. This is the only discussion I have done. The currency for which price is given is known as base currency. The currency in which price is expressed is known as price currency. If answer is greater than 1, it means base currency is stronger, and if answer is less than 1, it means price currency is stronger. That part we understood, right? When we look at the two quotations, that is price of dollar in terms of rupee and price of pound in terms of rupee, we understand that dollar as a currency is weaker compared to pound, because for 1 pound you need more rupee as compared to for $1. So in those cases we concluded that pound is greater than dollar. Okay, pound is greater than dollar. We concluded over there. Now I am coming to my next point of discussion. If we look at rupee per dollar quotation, and rupee per dollar quotation is 69 right now, then what are the two types of exposure that you can have? You can either have a dollar payable, or you can have a dollar receivable, isn't it? You can only have two types of exposure. You can either have a dollar payable, or you can have a dollar receivable. Okay, payable can be for an importer, or it can be for a foreign currency borrower, and receivable can happen under two situations. One is when you are an exporter, or you are foreign currency investor. These are the situations. So guys, if I ask you how many types of exposures can you have, you can have two types of exposure. You can have foreign currency payable. Okay, I'm writing dollar here, but let me say foreign currency. I can have foreign currency payable, or I can have foreign currency receivable. I can have foreign currency payable, or I can have foreign currency receivable. Payable, either we are importer or we are foreign currency borrower. Two situations in payable and two situations in receivable. That is, either you are an exporter or you are a foreign currency investor. Okay, now whenever you have foreign currency payable, think of it from accounting perspective. Payable is a liability, correct? No, payable is a liability. Payable is not an asset for you. Payable is a liability. Just answer one simple question. Are we afraid of liability going up or liability going down? Are we afraid of liability going up or liability going down? Everybody is afraid of liabilities going up. Nobody likes liability going up. Everybody is afraid of liability going up. So we are afraid of liability going up. If we have a payable, payable is a liability, we are afraid of liability going up. In this case, foreign currency is a liability for me and we are afraid of foreign currency appreciating. What does that mean? That means if you are an importer or if you are a foreign currency borrower, you are worried about foreign currency appreciating, correct? Now you will never forget in your life, whenever I ask you, any sum comes, okay, case study comes. In case study, we have a sum where we are an importer, and I will ask you, the first question I will ask you is, what are you afraid of? You should not say, sir, I am afraid of doing this sum altogether. No. What is the answer? What are we afraid of? Sir, I am an importer. I am having foreign currency payable. Payable is a liability. So I am afraid of foreign currency going up because we are afraid of liability going up. Similarly, if I am having a receivable, receivable is an asset. If I am having a receivable, receivable is an asset, and we are afraid of assets going down, isn't it? We are afraid of assets going down. That is, we are afraid of foreign currency depreciating. We are afraid of foreign currency depreciating. If we have a receivable, receivable is an asset and we are afraid of asset going down. So how you will remember, this is your total chapter summary. All your sums, all the variety of sums will be based on this discussion. Listen to me carefully. There are two types of exposure. Either you can have a foreign currency payable or you can have a foreign currency receivable. Either you can have a foreign currency payable or you can have foreign currency receivable. Payable, there are two situations. Either you are an importer or you are a foreign currency borrower. Receivable, again we can have two situations. Either I am an exporter, so I have foreign currency receivable, or I am investing in the foreign country, so I have foreign currency receivable. How do you understand? What is their worry? If, sir, we have a payable, payable is a liability, and if we have a liability, we are always afraid of liability going up. That is, we are afraid of foreign currency appreciation. If you have a receivable, receivable is an asset and we all are afraid of asset going down, and accordingly we are afraid of foreign currency depreciation. I hope we are clear with this part. Okay, so afraid of foreign currency appreciation if we have a payable, afraid of foreign currency depreciation if we have a receivable. So based on this, we have understood what kind of exposure we can have and what are we fearing. Now, so basically now you understand that what are the situations in which I will have a currency exposure. You have understood, right? Exposure means payable or receivable. The first thing is there should be a foreign currency payable or foreign currency receivable. Understand one thing, I'm telling you certain things and you tell me if that makes sense to you or not. I'm talking when are the situations I will have a currency exposure. Let's take my example. I am basically from Kolkata, but I travel to different places. Like I have my institute in Bangalore, Jiffy is in Bangalore, or I go to Kerala for teaching in Logic Institute. I go to Ahmedabad for teaching in Nafkar Institute. I have been to Hyderabad in Masterminds. I go to different places for teaching. Okay. Now the question is, when rupee depreciates against dollar, like I gave you three different examples. 2016 also I was doing teaching, 2019 also I was doing teaching, 2020 also I am doing teaching. So when I look at these different situations, my question to you is, when rupee depreciates against dollar from 64 to 67 or 67 to 74 or 70 to 75, is it going to impact me? Think about it and tell me. Is it going to impact Mr. KP? What is, you understood the profile of Mr. KP? Mr. KP is a faculty of finance. He travels across different places taking classes for CA. Wherever I go, I teach and I get paid for that. Tell me, am I worried about dollar depreciating or appreciating against rupee? Is it going to impact me? Answer is no. It is not going to impact me. Why? Because there is no cross-border transaction. There is no cross-border transaction. So I am not impacted at all, because I am operating within the national boundaries of my country. What does that mean? That means in order to get exposed to currency risk, the first condition is there should be a cross-border transaction. If you're not having a cross-border transaction, there is no foreign currency payable or receivable, as a result of which I will not be exposed to currency risk. Let's introduce situation 2. Introduce situation 2. I teach in different institutions in India. You have been one of my students. Now you are a qualified chartered accountant. After qualifying, you got placed as an accountant in one of the MBA institutions. You are working as an accountant in one of the MBA institutions in US. Listen carefully, okay? Case 2. Now what happens, one day you were sitting in the staff room with the faculties and you heard them talking about a finance faculty required by their institute, and they are like trying their level best, but they're not getting a finance faculty. So you give them a suggestion that, see, I know KP sir, I have taken SFM classes from him, and if you want, you can consider him. His knowledge is good enough. He can teach the students at least the forex derivatives, which is completely practical chapters. For that we can call him. And the institute management says that okay, we'll call KP sir, let us get in contact with KP sir. So they call me up on your from your institution, MBA institution. I get a call and they ask me that, KP sir, we are looking for a faculty who can teach the practicals that are involved in the financial markets, like derivatives, forex, portfolio management, these topics, if you can please handle. I said okay, no issues, I'll come and teach, but my fee for 10 days will be rupees 5 lakh. Okay, I'll come for 10 days, I'll teach them forex, derivatives and portfolio management, but I will charge 5 lakh rupees for that. And they agreed to that, because you know they are paying in dollars. For them 5 lakh is nothing when converted into dollars equivalent. They said no sir, no issues, you maintain quality, you maintain the quality in teaching, we don't mind paying you 5 lakh rupees, we'll pay you 5 lakh rupees. My question to you is, if I enter into this agreement and after that if 67 has become 74, will I be exposed to currency risk? That is my question. Will I be exposed to currency risk if 67 has become 74? That is my question to you. Answer is, I will still not be exposed to currency risk. I will still not be exposed to currency risk. Why sir? Because in this case I am going for rupee invoicing. That is, even if I am doing cross-border transaction, but I am charging rupees 5 lakh, which means I am going for home currency invoicing. It is home currency invoicing, not foreign currency invoicing. If it is home currency invoicing, I know exactly I will get 5 lakh rupees. It does not matter whether rupee against dollar is 67 or rupee against dollar is 74. It does not matter, because I know one thing, I will get paid exact amount of 5 lakh rupees for my services. So two conditions that should be satisfied. Now we have understood. Number one is that there should be a cross-border transaction. Number two, there should be foreign currency invoicing. If these two conditions are satisfied, only then I will be exposed to currency fluctuation risk. Otherwise, I don't have currency exposure. Okay, I hope you have understood this. I am introducing last part, point number 3. Same example. I teach in India. I got a call from MBA Institute where you are working as an accountant. They told me they want to ask me, they want to hire my services. I said, okay, I'll come and teach. But this time they told me that, sir, payments will be done in dollars. Payments will be done in dollars. I said, okay, you do me payments in dollars, but understand one thing. For Monday, if I teach, I should get my payment on Monday. Tuesday, if I teach, I should get my payment on Tuesday. Wednesday, if I teach, I should get my payment on Wednesday. I don't want any delay in my payments. They said, why, sir? You don't trust us? We will pay you after all 10 days. I said, no, that won't work for me. Because after 10 days, when I leave, if you don't pay me money and you become Vijay Mallya, what can I do about it? I am not going to fly back from India just to take my payment. So no, you do one thing. You want to pay in dollars, you pay in dollars. But I want payment on day-to-day basis. They agreed for that and we went for this assignment. Question is, in this scenario, case number 3, will I be exposed to currency fluctuation risk? Think about it. Will I be exposed to currency fluctuation risk in third scenario? There is a cross-border transaction. Agreed? Yeah. There is a foreign currency invoicing. Agreed? Yeah. But still, will I be exposed to currency fluctuation risk? Answer is no. I won't be exposed to currency fluctuation risk. Why, sir? Because date of transaction and date of settlement are same. Exposure will arise only when transaction date and settlement date are different. If date of transaction and date of settlement are same, there is no reason why you will be exposed to currency fluctuation risk, which means for anyone to get exposed to currency fluctuation risk, how many types of exposure? 2. Payable, receivable. Payable is a liability. We are afraid of liability going up. Receivable is an asset. We are afraid of asset going down. How many types of situations we can have in payable? 2. Importer, foreign currency borrower. How many situations we can have in receivable? 2. Exporter, foreign currency investor. These parts we have understood. But when will anyone have exposure to currency fluctuation risk? Sir, when 3 conditions are satisfied. Number 1, there should be a cross-border transaction. Number 2, there should be foreign currency invoicing. Number 3, date of transaction and date of settlement should be 2 different dates. Only when these 3 conditions are satisfied, you will get exposed to currency fluctuation risk. And this currency fluctuation risk, guys, I am adding one line here. This currency fluctuation risk which we are referring to is called as transaction exposure. Transaction exposure. We refer to it as transaction exposure. Transaction exposure means what? Transaction exposure means you know what is the foreign currency payable or receivable, but you don't know how much will be equivalent home currency outflow or inflow. Foreign currency payable or receivable is known, but you don't know how much will be home currency outflow or inflow because of currency fluctuation. That is called as transaction exposure. So remember one thing, for you to get exposed to transaction exposure, how many conditions should be satisfied? 3 conditions, sir. Number 1, there should be a cross-border transaction. Number 2, there should be foreign currency invoicing. Number 3, date of transaction and date of settlement should be 2 different dates. Guys, I hope we are understanding this. Guys. Okay. Lot of things we have discussed. Let's just recall things from your book. Okay, so if you come to the first part, what we have done, our book is done very systematically, guys. So what we have done is for every chapter we have done a central theme where you find a basics that why do you study that chapter. So central theme of Forex I'll discuss after some time. Give me some time. Then after that we have put something called as read to lead. Read to lead is basically a section where we have put all the important newspaper cuttings or some important information I found out on Google. I posted that. Why we have put it under the read to lead section is that for your knowledge you should read them, but in exam times you should avoid reading them because this will be wastage of your time in exam times. But now when I'm teaching, you should read it just to see how you can relate your knowledge to the practical markets. Okay. Then everywhere you will find some boxes which has KP remarks. Okay, and these parts are those discussions which I feel are very important, or I feel students often ask me questions from these parts. So those discussions are covered over here in KP remarks, okay, which I want you to revise on the last day, or I want you to put that extra focus on those topics. Those topics are covered in the KP remarks part. Okay. Now, if we come to the first part of our discussion, that is the exchange rate quotations and conversion. So we have concept capsules, and for every concept capsule we have different parts, part 1, part 2, part 3, like that. So we have divided the entire chapter into different concept capsules, and then for each concept capsule we have different parts of discussion, and then we have given some boxes where you can write notes. I'll dictate notes and you will write it. I can't give everything as pre-printed notes, otherwise you will sleep in my class. So just to make sure that you don't sleep, we have given some empty spaces for you to write notes, and I will dictate those notes. Okay. So if you look at the part 1 warm up, in the currency market, one currency can be bought / sold against another currency. The currency for which price is given is known as base currency. Guys, we already know this. The currency for which price is given is known as base currency, and the currency in which price is expressed is known as price currency. Correct? Suppose rupee per dollar is equal to 65. In this case, we know it is price of dollar expressed in terms of rupee. That is, dollar is the base currency and rupee is the price currency. Now suppose if in 3 months time rupee per dollar is equal to 67, okay, if from 65 it has become 67, what does that mean? Please write. It implies in 3 months time dollar has appreciated against rupee. Dollar has appreciated against rupee, and accordingly we need more rupee, for every dollar, and accordingly we need more rupee for every dollar. We need more rupee for every dollar. Next, suppose if rupee per pound is equal to 85. If rupee per pound is equal to 85, please write. Here pound is the base currency. Here pound is the base currency. Here pound is the base currency and rupee is the price currency. Here pound is the base currency and rupee is the price currency. That is, for every 1 pound, we need 85 rupees. For every 1 pound we need 85 rupees. Full stop. Comparing the above two quotations, we can see that more rupee is required. For every pound than against dollar. We see more rupee is required for every pound than against dollar. We see more rupee is required for every pound than against dollar. more rupees required for every pound than against dollar, and accordingly we can say pound is stronger than dollar, and accordingly we can say pound is stronger than dollar. Pound is stronger than dollar. Pound is stronger than dollar. Okay, I hope guys you have understood. We have already discussed all these things. Whatever I will speak in class, if it is relevant for you from exam perspective, it is given in your book. Okay, so you may not take running notes. I won't discourage you from taking it, because people who take running notes, it shows that they are very proactive and very dedicated. But so I won't discourage you from doing it, but all I am trying to say is that even if you don't take it down, you can rest assured everything is given in your book. Okay, let's read point number 2. Exposure to exchange rate fluctuation risk will arise if only if the following 3 conditions are cumulatively satisfied. What are the conditions, guys? We have already explained. No, with my example, there is a cross-border transaction. Invoicing is done in foreign currency, and date of transaction and date of settlement are 2 different dates. So you will remember it with KP sir example, MBA Institute. Some keywords you can write which will help you recall. KP sir example, MBA Institute. Okay. KP sir example, MBA Institute. Three conditions: cross-border transaction, invoicing is done in foreign currency, and date of transaction and date of settlement are 2 different dates. Only if 3 conditions are cumulatively satisfied. If you see, we have written the word cumulatively. They should be satisfied together. Only then we will be exposed to what we refer to it as transaction exposure. Transaction exposure I explained. You know foreign currency payable or receivable, but you don't know how much will be home currency equivalent. Okay. Next page, if you see, a note is given. Does this imply in case of home currency invoicing, we are not exposed to exchange rate risk? Does this mean that if somebody does not have a cross-border transaction, that person will not be exposed to currency risk? Answer is no. You will not have any escape. Everybody will be impacted by currency fluctuations. Understand that, guys. I am saying these 3 conditions should be satisfied in order to get exposed to transaction exposure. And I told you what is transaction exposure, but that does not mean that anybody else other than these 3 cases will not be exposed to currency fluctuation risk. In simple words, you can still be exposed to currency fluctuation risk even if these 3 conditions are not satisfied. The only difference is transaction exposure in such cases will become economic exposure. That is what is written here. No, there is no escape. Even if we invoice in home currency, we do have exposure to currency risk. It's just that the transaction exposure will transform into economic exposure, and we will discuss this in details on a later date. Right now we are only focusing on transaction exposure. So if I ask you, listen to me carefully, guys. If I ask you, when do you have transaction exposure? You will say transaction exposure will arise if 3 conditions are cumulatively satisfied. Number 1, foreign currency invoicing. Number 2, cross-border transaction. Number 3, date of transaction and date of settlement are 2 different dates. When will economic exposure arise? Economic exposure can arise anytime. Even if these 3 conditions are not satisfied, you can still have economic exposure. That is, even if you don't do business outside of India, even if you have home currency invoicing, then also you can have exposure to economic exposure. Sir, can you give us one example of economic exposure? But I told you I will discuss later. Sir, just one example. Okay, I'll give you one example. Listen. How can I be exposed? Suppose I have KP Industries and we are involved in manufacturing of machine X. Let's say it is machine X. We are having KP Industries and I am involved in machine X. my presence is only domestic presence. We don't do business outside of India. The moment I say we don't do cross-border transaction, one thing is clear: there is no transaction exposure. Come on, guys, tell me yes or no. There is no transaction exposure. The moment I tell you that we don't do any cross-border transaction, no question of transaction exposure arises. But does that mean Forex chapter is of no relevance to me? Forex chapter is still relevant to me. How, sir? How? See, that is what I'm telling you now. Suppose this is you. This is you, okay, Mr. You. So you in your business require machine X. So you call me up and you tell me, this is situation 1. This is situation 2. I'll explain you now. You call me up and you tell me, hi KP sir, how are you? I said, I'm fine. Sir, I need machine X. I said, okay. And you ask me, sir, how much will you charge me for that? I said, see, for you, you being a loyal customer to us, we keep the price intact. Every time we charge you 65,000. So we will keep the price same. Although there is inflation, for us the price of the machine has gone up a little bit, but for you we will charge the same price, no issues. Okay, thanks a lot KP sir, I'll come to you in half an hour time. We'll sit and have coffee together and we'll sign the deal. Very good. I'm waiting for you. In the meanwhile, what you do, this is the price given by KP. In the meanwhile, what you do, you call up Mr. Sam from US. Okay, and you ask him, how much is the price of the machine? He tells you price of the machine is $1,000. Then you call up Thomas Cook and you ask Thomas Cook, how much is rupee per dollar? And Thomas Cook tells you rupee per dollar is 70. When you look at these two things, you find that the price of the machine, equivalent price of the machine, if you get it imported from US, then the price will be 70,000 rupees, whereas KP sir is quoting how much? KP sir is quoting only 65,000. So you think it is better if I buy it from KP sir, because KP sir is charging less. So you come to me and you buy the machine from me. Guys, are you understanding what I'm saying? Look at situation 2. Again you call me up and you ask me, KP sir, how much for the machine? I said same price for you, because you always purchase from us. So for you we are charging the same price, that is 65,000. Oh, that's great sir. Then you call up Mr. Sam and Mr. Sam is also charging you the same price, which is $1,000. But something happens here and rupee per dollar has become 63 now. Rupee per dollar has become 63. What is the price in this case? Price is 63,000. Now KP sir is waiting for you with a cup of coffee, but you never turn up for obvious reasons, because you feel that why would I buy this machine from KP sir if I can import it for a lower price, and that lower price is how much? 63,000. Guys, I hope I'm making sense. I hope you're understanding what I'm saying. So KP Industries is located in India. They don't do any cross-border transactions still, because in the currency market rupee has appreciated. I hope you understand. When 70 becomes 63, when 70 becomes 63, rupee has appreciated, because you need less rupee for every dollar. You need less rupee for every dollar. If you need less rupee for every dollar, it means rupee has appreciated. If rupee has appreciated, imports will become cheaper for you, because you need to pay less for the imports. As a result of which, KP Industries started losing the volume of business. I called you up and I asked you, why did you not come? You said, sir, actually, let's be very honest about it. I got the same machine imported from US for 63,000. So why should I pay you 2,000 extra? Now it's a business, so there is no emotional thing, right? So you will say, sir, sorry, but I found it cheaper from imports, so I went ahead with the imports. I'm not doing business outside India. I'm not having any currency exposure, but still currency fluctuation is impacting me. So you need to understand Forex as a chapter is one such important chapter that everybody will be affected by Forex somewhere or the other. It's not that you are not doing cross-border transactions, you will not be worried about it. Anybody and everybody can get impacted by this particular scenario. Okay, I hope we are clear. This exposure is referred as economic exposure. Guys, I hope you understand that, and we'll discuss more on this. But understand one thing, your majority of discussion is going to be about transaction exposure. Economic exposure, we just have one sum that we will do towards the end of the chapter. Okay, look at point number 3. An importer or foreign currency borrower has foreign currency payable. I told you, there are two people who fall in the first category. Payable exposure is payable. How many category of people? Two. Importers or foreign currency borrowers have foreign currency payable and are afraid of foreign currency appreciation or home currency depreciation. How do you remember this? Look at this. This is the hints I have given here. You can write hints over there. Think of payable as a liability, that is foreign currency is a liability, and we are always afraid of liability going up. Like I told you, payable is a liability and we all are afraid of liability going up. Therefore, we are afraid of foreign currency appreciation. Similarly, think of receivable as an asset and we are afraid of asset going down. So foreign currency is an asset and we are afraid of asset going down. So whenever you have a receivable, when will you have a receivable? When you are an exporter or you are a foreign currency investor, then you have foreign currency receivable and you are afraid of foreign currency depreciation. Foreign currency depreciation means you are afraid about home currency appreciation. Just for your general knowledge, point number 5 is given to you that there are two currencies which are most recognized currencies across the globe. So when you're doing business outside of India, in most of the cases, you will not be allowed to do trading in rupee terms. You will have to do it in some foreign currency. And in most cases, the recognized foreign currency that is used is either dollar or pound. Dollar or pound are the two most recognized currencies that are used. In fact, dollar is considered as a functional currency. That is, most countries prefer to use dollar as invoice currency as it enjoys high liquidity. So countries will go for dollar. Dollar has the most recognition, most liquid currency across the globe. Then you can have pound. Then some countries can go for yen also. Okay, dollar, pound, yen. These are the currencies which primarily are used for the purpose of trading, okay, across the globe. Next is sometimes it might happen that two countries are doing business, and in such cases they will not use the currency of their own country, but they will go for third currency invoicing. Like I'm giving you one example. If we in India are doing business with Bangladesh, now Indian currency is rupee, Bangladesh currency is taka. So if India and Bangladesh are doing trade, chances are less that they will use either of rupee or taka. What they might do in such cases is that they might use third currency invoicing, maybe like US dollar or UK pound, okay, because these currencies have more liquidity. Indians will always want to do the business in rupee, but the question is, will Bangladesh agree to that? Maybe not. Bangladesh would prefer to go for dollars because dollars for them will be again a liquid currency. Understood? So in any transaction, either of the countries will be exposed to exchange rate risk. One country will be exposed to currency risk. One will be exposed to transaction risk. One will not be exposed to transaction risk. Suppose if I am offering services to US Institute, coming back to the same example, if I am rendering my services to MBA Institute in US, and if they are supposed to pay me in rupee, then I don't have transaction risk. Transaction exposure is not there, but they have transaction exposure because they got to pay me in rupee. So they will have to sell dollar, buy rupee. They will be exposed to currency risk. I'll tell you one simple thing, guys. You just remember, you just answer one thing. Who will go to currency market? Whoever goes to currency market for conversion, that person will be exposed to currency risk. Whoever goes to currency market for conversion, that person will be exposed to currency risk. So if I am getting paid in rupee terms from the US Institute, then they will go to currency market for conversion, and accordingly they will be exposed to currency risk. On the contrary, if they are paying me in dollars, then I will go to currency market for conversion, and accordingly I will be converting my dollars into rupee and I will be exposed to currency risk. So what I am saying is, in the transaction, either of the countries will be exposed to exchange rate risk. One country will be exposed to exchange rate risk. But if we are doing third currency invoicing, then both countries can have exposure. Example, trade between India and Indonesia. India currency is rupee, Indonesia currency is Indonesian rupiah, RUPIYAH. That's the currency for Indonesia, Indonesian rupiah. Indian company exports to Indonesia and invoice amount is $40,000. Indian companies exporting to Indonesia, they are not taking money in rupee, they are not taking money in rupiah, but they are charging in dollars. What will happen in that case? Let's see. This is a case of third currency invoicing. You can write it. This is a case of third currency invoicing. Indian company has dollar. Indian company has dollar receivable. Indian company has dollar receivable. It is therefore afraid of dollar depreciating against rupee. It is therefore afraid of dollar depreciating against rupee. Indonesian company has dollar payable, and you know payable is a liability. Indonesian company has dollar payable, bracket you can write liability. Payable is a liability, right? Indonesian company has dollar payable, bracket liability, it is therefore afraid of dollar appreciating against Indonesian rupiah. It is therefore afraid of dollar appreciating against Indonesian rupiah. It is therefore afraid of dollar appreciating against Indonesian rupiah. Okay, so both have exposure in third currency invoicing. Guys, this was point number 6 in your book. You can do one thing, you can add one point here as point number 7. Point number 7 you can add over here. We have some space. One currency appreciation automatically means another currency depreciation. One currency appreciation automatically means another currency depreciation. Okay, the words appreciation and depreciation are used on relative basis. If we say one currency is appreciated, it automatically means that another currency has depreciated. One currency appreciation automatically means another currency depreciation. Okay, couple of more points I'll discuss, then I'll call off the class. Okay, so as I told you, in our entire discussion of forex problems, you will in most cases encounter one of the following situations. Okay, like situation number 1, I told you, there are how many situations we have discussed? 4 situations total. Exposures are 2, payable or receivable, but situations can be 4. There is an Indian company and a US company. Flight is coming this way, which means Indian company has imported goods from US company for $5 lakh payable after 6 months. Indian company has imported goods from US company for $5 lakh payable after 6 months. Indian company will get the goods today. After 6 months, they will have to buy the dollar. For buying dollar, they will go to the money exchanger, give rupee, buy dollar, and then they will pay dollars. Correct? This is the situation. First tell me, is this a cross-border transaction? Yes. Cross-border transaction? Yes. Is this foreign currency invoicing? Yes. Are the date of transaction and date of settlement 2 different dates? Yes. All 3 conditions are satisfied, guys. Cross-border transaction, we are importing from US. Foreign currency invoicing, yeah, we have $5 lakh payable, and date of transaction and date of settlement are 2 different dates, because we are buying today, paying after 6 months. All 3 conditions are satisfied. Okay, you can just write like that, like the way I have written. CBT, cross border transaction, yes. Foreign currency invoicing, yes. Date of transaction and date of settlement are two different dates, yes. Some dotted lines are given below. If you see, you can write over there. After 6 months, Indian company will buy dollar after 6 months Indian company will buy dollar to make payment. Indian company will buy dollar to make payment. And accordingly it will be afraid of dollar appreciating against rupee. It will be afraid of dollar appreciating against rupee in 6 months time. It will be afraid of dollar appreciating against rupee in 6 months time. It will be afraid of dollar appreciating against rupee in 6 months time. Okay, next, situation 2. Indian company, US company, Indian company sold goods to US company for $10 lakh receivable in 3 months. So here you are an exporter. First case you were an importer. You can mention that also. First case we were an importer. Second case we are exporter. So we sold goods for $10 lakh. Amount is receivable after 3 months. After 3 months, what will happen? Indian company will receive $10 lakh and sell dollars to the money exchanger to convert into rupee. Let's answer the questions. Is this a cross-border transaction? Yeah, because you're selling to the US entity. Is there a foreign currency invoicing? Answer is yes, it's a foreign currency invoicing. And last case, is the date of transaction and date of settlement two different dates? Answer is yes, because we are going to settle after 3 months. Date of transaction is not same as date of settlement. You have some dotted lines below. Please write Indian entity. Indian entity will sell dollar after 3 months to convert into rupee. Indian entity will sell dollar after 3 months to convert into rupee. Indian entity will sell dollar after 3 months to convert into rupee, and is therefore afraid of dollar depreciating against rupee. Situation number 3 relates to a foreign currency borrower. I'll take one hypothetical example first to explain it to you. Suppose I go to HDFC Bank, I means KP. KP goes to HDFC Bank. KP goes to HDFC Bank to take a working capital loan for a year, and HDFC Bank is charging me, let's say, 10%. When I was coming out of the bank, I've almost like fixed the agreement that okay, I'll come in a week's time and I'll take this loan, and the loan will cost me how much? 10%. But when I'm leaving the bank, I come across you and you ask me, sir, how are you in the bank? So you have already become a chartered accountant and you are working for, let's say, Citibank. But you're working for Citibank US department. Okay, loan approver you are. You ask me, sir, why have you come to HDFC? I said, no, just come for some working capital loan. How much is the loan, sir, you are looking for? I said 1 lakh. How much are they charging you? I said 10%. You told me, sir, why don't you take it from Citibank? I said, why should I take it from Citibank? You said, sir, if you take it from Citibank US, they will only charge you 4% and you can save 6% in that case. I said, but there will be a lot of compliances, right? Because foreign currency borrowing will be involved. You said, no, sir, don't worry about that. I'll ask you for certain documents. Just make sure you give me those documents. Rest I'll take care. I said, great. I'll then give you the documents. I'll save 6% on this. And I leave the bank happily. KP leaves the bank happily. But what I did not realize in this happiness is that if I go for foreign currency borrowing, I will have additional exposure, and that exposure is currency fluctuation risk, which I did not think about. On this day, rupee per dollar was 60. Okay. Now what happens? After 1 year, I am a borrower. So after 1 year, when I want to repay my loan, I will have to buy back dollars for making payment. Foreign currency borrower will have to pay dollars. Payable is a liability. We are afraid of liability going up. After 1 year, suppose this becomes 66, which means dollar appreciated by 10%. Are you understanding? Which means 1 lakh plus 4% is 1 lakh 4,000. But this 1 lakh 4,000 I will have to buy at the rate of 66, not at the rate of 60. When I got the money, I got it at 60. But when I am repaying my loan, I am repaying it at 66. Which makes me really unhappy. Why, sir? Because 4% is the cost I suffered on the loan and 10% is the loss I suffered in the currency market. Because in currency market, when I got at 60. But when I am buying to repay, I am repaying at 66. Which means my total cost is 4 plus 10, 14%. Or in other words, if I find out the compound cost, because 66 I am suffering on total 1,04,000. If I do the compounding, I make a factor of 4%. What is a factor of 4%? Factor means if 1 rupee will grow at 4%, if 1 rupee will grow at 4%, how much will it become? 1.04 into 1.10 minus 1. If I do this, (1.04) into 1.10 minus 1, this comes to 14.4%. Effectively, I suffered a cost of 14.4% by going for a foreign currency borrowing, whereas in India, HDFC was giving me a loan for 10%. I call you up and I tell you, boss, you did not do good with me. Why did you make me borrow from Citibank? The cost has gone up to 14.4%. You were telling me a saving of 6%. In fact, I ended up paying 4.4% extra. You told me, come on, sir, I learned Forex from you only. When you are taking Citibank loan, you should have considered foreign currency, the foreign currency exposure. Then you are putting it back on me. That's what bankers are supposed to do. So that is point number 3. Last point, okay, we are discussing for the class. Point number 3, Indian entity, US entity. Indian entity decides to avail a loan of $1 lakh at 5%. This is a case of foreign currency borrower. I told you there are only 4 cases in total. Importer, exporter, we did. Foreign currency borrower we are doing, and foreign currency investor we will do later on. So foreign currency borrower, we have taken a loan from US entity. We have taken a 1 lakh loan at the rate of 5%. Suppose this is a bullet repayment structured loan that we have taken. That is interest we have to pay every year, and principal we have to pay one shot on one shot principal repayment will be done on maturity of the loan. That is bullet repayment structure. Please remember that, guys. Bullet repayment structure is interest will be paid every year and principal will be paid one shot on maturity. In this case, Indian entity has multiple exposure to exchange rate fluctuation, as every year it will have to buy dollar for interest payments and it would like dollar to depreciate against rupee. Payable is a liability. We want liability to go down. So we would like if dollar depreciates against rupee. In case of foreign currency borrowing, effective cost of funding. In case of foreign currency borrowing, effective cost of funding is made up of 2 components, that is cost of funds. In my example, 4% cost of loan from Citibank. You can just write that so that you can recall the example. Cost of funds is 4% cost of loan from Citibank. What is my effective cost of funding? Cost of funds, that is 4% cost of loan from Citibank, and plus foreign currency appreciation. If there is a foreign currency appreciation, my cost will go up, minus foreign currency depreciation. If foreign currency depreciates, then my cost will go down, plus foreign currency appreciation minus foreign currency depreciation. So in this case, dollar appreciates by 10%. If you remember the example, dollar appreciates by 10% in 1 year. Therefore, effective cost is equal to 4 plus 10, 14%. Effective cost is equal to 4 plus 10, 14%. Or 1.04 into 1.10 minus 1. Like I told you, we take the compound effect. 1.04 into 1.10 minus 1, which is equal to 14.4%. 14.4%. Okay, so I'm not continuing with situation 4 right now, because again situation 4 requires me to explain you certain more concepts, and I feel the class would have been already heavy for you because this is your first class. So let's stop it over here. Revise your stuff, guys. One more suggestion from my end is that whatever I'm teaching, it will be great if you can please revise it on a daily basis. That will be really nice if you can revise it on a daily basis, whatever I'm teaching, because the concepts are fresh in your mind. If you revise it on the same day, then you have any doubts, you can ask me your doubts also. Okay, so we'll continue with the discussion in the next class. Make sure you revise everything, and if you have any doubts, shoot your queries to me on my WhatsApp number, okay, which is there on the screen in front of you. Thank you. God bless all of you.